What is up, DTube? What is up, Steam blockchain? So today I want to talk a little bit about something that I saw, which was pretty interesting. So Gab has basically forked the Brave browser, and you can go check out what Gab is and what they are doing. But in this video, I want to talk a little bit about this speed up of disruption and how it sort of works now. What happens is the disruptor gets disrupted. So the innovation on innovation on innovation, what is sort of happening is that when tools of software and hardware, when it gets more easy to access, it makes it so anyone can innovate because they basically have the tools for that, and that is basically what we're seeing. So basically, the Brave browser, which is my main browser right now because it is has this built-in ad block and has this BAT token, which the core idea of the Brave browser was to create an experience, a nice web browsing experience of not having to see ads with built-in ad blocking. But then they do have this token, BAT token, which is kind of cool because it allows you to tip people, for example, tip YouTubers easily with the browser extension that they have built in. But now they're sort of moving towards a phase where you can watch ads and get paid tokens. So in some ways that's sort of cool. I saw that some people are using a VPN used to watch ads. That is sort of interesting. But there is sort of, I think, a core problem with this, with the whole ad model, and that is that the ad model actually should go 100% crypto. The advertising needs to move. The whole industry basically needs to move to be a token based and be on a blockchain and be more transparent. But obviously that's going to take some time. So Brave is sort of trying to find a path between. They're sort of trying to satisfy the token side, the blockchain world, and people doesn't like advertising, and also trying to satisfy advertisers at the same time by making basically trying to find a common ground where people can view ads and get paid in tokens. But ideally, eventually, it should be in the way where the whole ad industry, that whole industry should move to a blockchain. But obviously that's going to take some time, and that is why we're seeing now open source projects being forked. And it's called fork. It's kind of funny because this is something that we also see in the crypto industry, that people are copying things. So a blockchain can be forked. For example, you had Stellar, and Kin was a fork of, or first they were running on Ethereum, then I think they were running on some Stellar sort of blockchain, and then they made their own, they basically made their own fork of the Stellar blockchain. So we saw this with Ethereum. You have now Ethereum Classic, and you have Ethereum Classic is actually, from what I've heard, the original Ethereum. And then you have this other Ethereum that is worth more. That's basically the more mainstream Ethereum. And then you have, for example, Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Private, all these forks, and it's a whole story behind it. But I think that humans will sort of what are humans trying to do? Well, humans are trying to create the best interface that is basically built for the users. And that's basically why Gab here is forking the Brave browser. And they sort of, what happens then is they can remove some features, and They can build a customized experience. For example, they have included their own comment system, which is kind of cool, because one big issue with the whole internet right now is a lot of websites doesn't even have comments. There's not even a way to comment. Then you have other interface problems with a lot of websites right now, where you can't even view articles because you have to pay. But if every website wants you to pay, it's going to be very expensive, and that's the same problem that is with the ad industry, that all the websites basically needs to move to blockchain platforms where it's more win-win for everyone. It becomes problematic when they're trying to play in the old system and you have this new system. So we see with EOS.io chains, side chains, that humans are going to have RAM, they're going to have network, and they're going to have CPU. And this is pretty expensive right now. It's you have some EOS.io side chains that are cheaper, but a lot of people doesn't know about it, and it's pretty expensive, basically bandwidth and all of this. So what probably is going to happen is these big companies eventually, Samsung and Apple, they are basically, and Amazon and on all these big companies eventually, they're the only ones, for example, that can sort of fund this, where they will be able to on-ramp a lot of people. For example, let's say Apple makes it so you buy a new iPhone and you get an EOS account. Whoa! Now they basically humans have an incentive. Oh, wait a sec. I need to get the latest iPhone so I can get an EOS account. That I can see that be a big thing, and then I can see Samsung come in, because we got the new news right now that Samsung may be building their own Samsung coin and maybe even their own blockchain. So we're seeing all these companies, all these big companies that sort of made a lot of money in hardware and software, and they are basically the ones who can sort of fund this new era where humans need a lot of bandwidth, a lot of resources to do stuff on a network. Obviously, this is very nuanced, and it may not happen, but it sort of seems like, just as with the early stage of the internet, it was probably expensive to run a website, it was expensive to get the hardware, but eventually, over time, it's going to get cheaper, hopefully, probably, which means it's going to be interesting to see all this open source code, basically who owns code. That is also a very nuanced area, like who owns code. And isn't it, the ideal, obviously, is the open source, so anyone can innovate. And I think eventually people they sort of gonna come to terms with this, that anyone can copy ones and zeros and try to create their own sort of interface, their own blockchain, their own token, whatever it is now that they want to explore. Because if humans really are serious about trying to do something decentralized, it means we need probably thousands of tokens, thousands of blockchains. Just even if a lot of it is not adding so much value, it still is sort of, it tries, like it's almost like the universe or nature is trying to see what works. It is just as with humans being born, and nature sort of in a way tries to run a bunch of experiments. Nature is always, in a way you can look at it like that humans are an experiment. And then we can get into the Elon Musk topics of is the a simulation or whatever. I think Nick Bostrom is talking about that. But in a way, you can see that nature is almost running all these simulations, and now we're getting to the point where everyone can run simulations themselves to explore. So it's very interesting how Gab is now forking the Brave browser. It's not out right now, but it's probably going to come out soon. And it's sort of funny because for the consumer, I think it's going to be win in the long run, because they are basically, they have so many alternatives, so they don't have to be at a specific place. They can sort of they have alternatives, so they can see, well, do I want to use a Samsung phone or an Apple phone? Do I want to use this software? Do I want to download stuff from this store? Do I want to use this software? Do you want to use this token? Do I want to use this blockchain? Do I want to use this web browser? All of this. It's kind of cool how consumers, the alternatives, there's a lot of options that people have, and that is kind of cool, because a lot of the projects right now, they're not really doing anything magical. At least when we talk about the token-based world, a lot of projects just have a white paper. They don't have that much more information, and humans will sort of start to eventually use pattern recognition. So eventually they're gonna learn. They're gonna be able to see what really adds value. For example, you have a lot of token projects right now where you can, for example, post something. They're trying to be like a decentralized social media or whatever. Maybe you get some fantasy tokens, but you can't withdraw them. And that is one big thing that we sort of see with a lot of projects right now. And eventually people are going to see, well, it doesn't really seem like a lot is happening over here. And eventually people are probably going to want to raise their standards, or people are going to automatically, let's say they have a good staking token, or they're using a good web browser. It's going to take a lot for a person then to switch to something else. It needs to be way, way better. It truly needs to innovate. This is the same thing with, even when we have sort of decent token systems right now. I mean, okay, maybe not decent, but we can see that for a person actually to make a switch from fiat or whatever, it's going to take so much. It's not just Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin's been out for around 10 years now, and then even that it takes a very long time for people to make a switch, because there's a lot of things that needs to happen. Technology, people don't actually have high standards in many ways of what we're looking at it, but what I mean is it needs to become so easy, and the value needs to be so high that it's just so easy to make a switch, and they see the value proposition, that there's so much value that is being given that, okay, I'm gonna make a switch. And right now we have a lot of apps that are basically competing for humans' attention. For example, a lot of people are using a lot of services to do the same thing. Eventually this is probably going to merge into one UI that does everything. Something I talked about in the past, that instead of using a ton of different apps, why can't we use one app that has all the features inside, and we don't have to always make a switch? Same as how we're using tabs, or how many people are probably using tabs on computers, always flipping between these back and forth. It seems as we can do this way more efficient, and it's probably going to happen naturally eventually. So it's cool to see more open source stuff happen, and it's just cool to see more open competition be able to happen between various projects. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because it's kind of cool. I mean, what happens now is you're almost going to switch yearly now the level of software you're using, because most of the stuff is mainly now software. The software, the sort of apps you're using, it almost seems like you're going to switch to something better every year now, and eventually we're going to merge everything into something brand new. Who knows, even if we're going to use phones, it might be something super small, who knows. But yeah, cool times, a lot of stuff happening. Have a great day, DTube. Have an awesome day. Steam, blockchain, bye bye.